Hello.
It started with silence. Not the kind that falls comfortably between people who know each other well, but the kind that stretches like a shadow, long, patient, and full of things you're too afraid to say aloud. That was the silence between me and Jack after Mom died. I was 17 when the cancer took her. 1 year left of high school, one more round of prom photos and college applications. But all of that blurred after the funeral. The house felt wrong without her laughter. The way she used to sing off-key while folding laundry or hum when stirring her coffee. She had this particular way of anchoring the chaos, and when she vanished, so did gravity. Jack, my stepfather, didn't say much in the weeks after. He kept his grief tucked into the corners of the house, like a worn coat he refused to throw away. But I noticed the quiet things. He always left the porch light on for me, even when I stayed out too late. My tuition money showed up without me asking. And when I told him I couldn't sleep in my room anymore because it smelled too much like her shampoo, he handed me a spare blanket and said, "Then sleep in the den. I'll take the couch." He never once asked for thanks. He never had to. Jack's a truck driver. Always has been. He drives a 2016 Peterbilt with chrome mirrors and a coffee-stained seat that smells like leather and long hours. He used to be the quiet presence that showed up on weekends with grocery bags and greasy knuckles. The man who taught me how to change a tire and drive stick before I learned algebra. He was Mom's second chance. My first idea of stability. But when she died, something between us shifted. Not in a dramatic, soap opera way. No forbidden gazes or whispers in the dark. Just a growing closeness, like vines wrapping around the same post, growing toward the same light. I told him more than once that I wanted to be a trucker too. He used to laugh. That a fact? Absolutely, I'd say, leaning on the kitchen counter, chin in my hand. I want to be that contradiction. A girl who weighs 110 pounds but commands 40 tons of steel. Jack always looked at me like he didn't quite know what to do with that. Maybe he thought it was a phase. Maybe he was hoping I'd come to my senses and apply to some university with a safe dorm and meal plan. But I didn't. And eventually, he stopped laughing. It began with weekend trips. I'd ride shotgun, bare feet propped on the dash, earbuds in while he handled the rig like it was an extension of his body. We'd share burgers off truck stop counters and take turns cleaning the windshield when it was too smeared with bug guts to see through. I kept a notebook full of route notes and CB lingo, my personal gospel of the road. And he started teaching me. Not in the way most dads teach daughters things, half distracted, full of disclaimers. Jack was different. He walked me through brake checks and blind spots, taught me how to ease through turns without killing the suspension. He let me take the wheel more and more, until driving the Peterbilt felt like wearing a second skin. It wasn't just lessons. It was trust. That's when the silence changed. It softened. Jack and I began to talk again, the way we used to before Mom got sick. About music. The weather. Politics, sometimes, if we were feeling brave. But mostly about the road. About how the night sky looks different from a rest stop in Montana versus one in Arizona. How diesel hum can become a lullaby if you listen right. We became a team. He called me co-pilot. I started calling him partner. And then one night, somewhere off a rural exit in Nebraska, I caught myself watching him sleep. The bunk behind the seats was cramped, barely enough for 2 people. But we'd made it work. I was curled beside him, a thin line of separation between us that hadn't been there at first, but I'd slowly started to erase it. Just little things. Our shoulders touching. My hand brushing his arm in the dark. That night, I saw the way his jaw relaxed when he slept. The stubble along his cheek, the faint crease between his brows that never went away even in dreams. And I thought, God, he looks beautiful. And then I thought, what the hell is wrong with me? It wasn't the first time. And I was starting to suspect it wouldn't be the last. I tried to push it down. I tried to be normal, whatever that meant. But the feelings kept creeping in, slow and certain, like morning fog over a mountain pass. I started testing him. Light things. Teasing, mostly. Once, when he was guiding me through a tight parking maneuver, I said, "Bet you didn't think your stepdaughter would grow up to be such a badass behind the wheel, huh?" He smirked. "You're better than half the rookies I've trained. So, I'm making you proud." He glanced at me sideways. "Yeah, you are." And for some reason, that made my throat tighten. Other times, I'd say something like, "If I weren't your daughter, would you think I was pretty?" He'd blink. "What kind of question is that?" "Just curious," I'd shrug. "It's not illegal to say someone's attractive, you know." But he'd never bite. Never cross that line. Even if I wanted him to. That's how it went for months. Me, testing the current. Jack, holding the line. Until the night in Colorado. We were parked on a ridgeline above a sprawling canyon, the sunset a mess of gold and fire. I brewed us coffee from a battered French press we kept in the cab. Jack sat in the driver's seat, one boot on the dash, watching the sky like it was a movie made just for him. I climbed onto his lap. No hesitation. No warning. Just me, heart pounding, legs straddling him. He stiffened. "Maddie." I pressed my hands to his chest. Don't say anything yet." His breath caught. I felt it. And I knew in that electric stillness, that I hadn't been wrong. There was something there. A spark. A thread connecting us. "It's so romantic," I said, voice soft. "The road. This view. Us. Maddie, you're I'm not a little girl anymore." I leaned forward, close enough that I could smell the coffee on his breath. "And you're not just some man who married my mom." He didn't kiss me. But he didn't move away either. His hands found my waist. Just resting. But firm. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying and true. Nothing between us would ever be the same again. Jack didn't say a word. Not when I pulled back. Not when I slid off his lap and curled into the corner of the bunk, my back to the wall, pretending the air between us wasn't buzzing like power lines after a storm. He sat there a long time, coffee cooling in his hands, gaze fixed on the windshield and the fire-colored sky. We didn't talk about what happened that night, or the way his hands had held me just long enough to matter, or the fact that neither of us moved until the sunset was gone and the stars had settled like frost across the sky. The next morning, Jack was already in the driver's seat when I woke up. The cab smelled like strong coffee and denial. He glanced at me once in the mirror and said, "Got a long haul today. Wyoming to Salt Lake. Hope you're rested." And that was that. I didn't push. I didn't need to. Because the silence between us had changed again. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full. With what we didn't say. With the memory of touch. With the weight of knowing we'd stepped onto a path with no road signs and no map. We were quiet for hours. Just the hum of the engine and the rhythmic squeak of worn windshield wipers against prairie rain. I watched the landscape roll by, my reflection ghosting in the window, and thought about all the things I didn't know how to say. Eventually, I broke the silence. "You remember when Mom first introduced us?" Jack chuckled, the sound low, almost reluctant. "She told me you hated me." "I did," I admitted, grinning faintly. "You wore those awful shirts. The ones with the flames on the sleeves." He laughed. "They were cool. They were tragic. You were 12 and full of attitude. And you were this stranger trying too hard." His smile faded a little, but not in a sad way. "Guess I've always been trying too hard." That struck something deep. I shifted in my seat, turned toward him. "You didn't have to try, Jack. You just had to stay." And you did. He didn't look at me, just nodded once. Didn't know what I was doing most of the time. Still don't. I reached over, resting my hand gently on his arm. You did fine. He swallowed hard. I felt the muscle flex beneath my fingers. And then I let go. That's how it was for the next few weeks. Near misses and quiet intimacy. We fell into our rhythm again, but it was different now. More electric. When we showered at truck stops, we waited for each other outside the stalls. Not watching, just aware. When we worked out by the side of the rig, our hands brushed more often. When we climbed into bed behind the cab, we didn't build a wall of blankets anymore. And one night, in a tiny town in Nevada where the sky was navy velvet and the stars were loud, we kissed. It happened without warning. We'd pulled over for the night beside a dried-up riverbed, the truck quiet for once. The world felt still, like it had paused to listen. Jack had opened the hood to check something in the engine, and I stood nearby, arms crossed, watching the way the moonlight slid over his shoulders. You always look like that when you're focused, I said. Like nothing could break you. He grunted. I'm not that tough. You are to me. He looked up. Our eyes met, and something passed between us, a crack in the dam we'd been trying so hard to hold. I took a step forward, then another, and I kissed him. It was slow, gentle, the kind of kiss that asks permission while still daring to happen. I pressed my mouth to his, just enough to feel the shape of him. His lips didn't move at first, frozen in shock or fear or maybe something else. But then, after a breathless moment, they did. He kissed me back. Only for a second. But it was real. When we pulled apart, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. We both knew we'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Back in the cab, we lay side by side, not touching. The space between us felt louder than ever before. I wanted to speak, but I couldn't find the right words, just 1,000 wrong ones. I rolled onto my side, staring at the thin fabric wall that separated us from the world. Are you okay? I asked. Jack took a long breath. You're not a little girl anymore. No, I whispered. I'm not. And I'm not your father. I turned toward him. You never were. He met my eyes in the dimness. This isn't easy, Maddie. I know. It's not wrong, I added, softly, like a confession. Not really. He didn't answer, but his hand found mine beneath the blanket, fingers brushing like apology and promise all at once. We lay like that, our hands clasped, the truck gently rocking in the wind. We didn't sleep much, and when the sun rose the next morning, spilling pale gold across the dashboard, I knew something had changed again. We weren't just a team anymore. We were something else. Something deeper. Something dangerous. Something unstoppable. The strange thing about change is that it doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just arrives, quietly, completely, like dawn slipping over the mountains. You don't notice it at first, but then suddenly, everything's bathed in light. That's what it felt like with Jack. After that night, after the kiss and the touch of our hands beneath the blanket, we didn't speak about what had happened. But everything was different. Not in some dramatic soap opera way. There was no tension, no guilt. Just a quiet deepening. A shift in the way we looked at each other. The way we moved. We started living in sync. He'd pour my coffee before I asked. I'd tighten the straps on his load before he climbed out of the cab. We fell into a rhythm that didn't need explaining, like we'd been doing this for years, not weeks. Like we weren't still trying to make sense of what we were becoming. One morning outside a rest stop in Idaho, I caught him watching me as I did stretches by the truck. The sun was low, the sky still streaked with sleep, and I had one leg on the bumper, arms overhead, breathing in the cold. What? I asked, grinning, without opening my eyes. Jack shook his head, sipping from his thermos. You're something else. The words hit harder than he probably meant them to. I know, I replied, heart thudding. That day we drove for 10 hours, through pine-scraped mountains and long stretches of empty road. We didn't talk much, but the silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was warm, lived in, like we were both listening for something inside ourselves, trying to name the thing that had bloomed between us. That night, we stopped near a lake in Washington, the water dark and silver under the moon. Jack parked the rig by the edge and climbed onto the hood with a sigh. I followed. We sat side by side in the quiet, our boots dangling, watching the reflections shift on the surface. You ever think about what comes next? I asked. Jack didn't answer right away. All the time. I looked over. What do you see? He hesitated. Then, without looking at me, you. Driving your own rig. Making your own routes. Free. The words made my chest tighten. And you. He smiled, a little sad. I don't know if I'm part of that picture. I turned to face him fully. You are. Maddie. No, I said, firm. You're not just some chapter in my story. You're part of the reason I can even imagine the future. His jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the lake. This isn't simple. It's not supposed to be. Then, gently, I leaned in. He didn't pull away this time. His hand came up, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. His thumb lingered on my cheek. We were close enough to breathe the same air, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. The rig, the lake, the years of shouldn'ts and can'ts. And we kissed again. Slower this time. Certain. His hand slid around the back of my neck, pulling me closer. My fingers found the soft fabric of his flannel, clinging to it like a lifeline. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't stolen. It was ours. When we finally pulled apart, the look in his eyes broke something open in me. You scare me, I whispered. Why? Because I never thought love could feel this, right? Jack exhaled, his voice ragged. Neither did I. Back in the truck, we didn't sleep right away. We lay side by side, facing each other, our knees barely touching. You really think I can do this? I asked. Do what? Be a real driver. Handle the road on my own. He reached for my hand under the blanket. Maddie, you've got more grit than half the men I've trained. You're not just capable, you're meant for this. Tears pricked at the back of my eyes. Then why do I still feel like I'm pretending? Because you're young, he said. And strong. And human. I stared at him. Do you think I'm wrong? For wanting this, all of this? Jack pulled me closer then, his arms wrapping around me in a way that felt both safe and electric. No, he said. I think you're braver than I'll ever be. That night, wrapped in his warmth, listening to the soft tick of the cooling engine, I realized something. We weren't just partners anymore. We were in love. It didn't matter what the world called us. It didn't matter that our bond wasn't born from blood or convention. What mattered was the way he looked at me, as if I wasn't just the girl he helped raise, but the woman he'd chosen. The woman he saw clearly. Completely. And in the hush of that cab, our hearts finally beat in time. We crossed into Oregon with the windows rolled down, the coastal wind tangling my hair as I laughed for no reason other than the fact that I felt free. Jack glanced at me from the driver's seat, eyes crinkling at the edges, the corner of his mouth twitching with something soft. Something unspoken. Something that had become ours. A month had passed since that night by the lake. Since the kiss that made us both fall through the silence we'd carefully built. We hadn't gone back to how things were. Not entirely. There was no way to. Not when our days were now laced with glances that lingered too long, shared breakfasts that felt like promises, and nights that ended with whispered conversations and slow, aching touches. But we didn't rush it. Jack still had moments when he went quiet, his thoughts folding in on themselves like old maps. I'd watch him from the passenger seat, his hands steady on the wheel, his eyes focused on the road ahead, and I'd know that he was trying to make sense of it all. Of us. And yet, he never pulled away. If anything, he became more present, more attuned. He started complimenting me more. Not just about driving, though he never stopped being my teacher, but about everything else. "You're fearless," he said once, as I climbed back into the truck after handling a tough delivery. "Not just on the road. In life." I didn't say anything then, just leaned across the seat and kissed his cheek, slow and deliberate. And he blushed. Jack, the man who never flinched from a challenge or a storm, blushed like a boy. One night, we stopped at a quiet campground near the Oregon coast. The ocean was only a mile away, and we could hear the waves in the distance, a soft pulse like the heartbeat of the earth. I set up a small campfire while Jack tinkered with the side mirror that had rattled loose during the last run. When he joined me by the fire, he sat close. Too close to be casual. "I've been thinking," he said, stirring the flames with a stick. "Dangerous habit." He smiled, but there was something serious in his eyes. "When you take your CDL test next week, you're going to pass." I shrugged, my heart stammering. "Maybe." "No maybe," he said. "You will. And after that, things will change." I looked at him, then really looked. "You mean, I'll have my own license? Start driving solo?" He nodded. "You'll be on your own." The idea made something inside me ache. "Do you want that?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "I want what's best for you." I reached for his hand. "And what if what's best for me is you?" Jack turned toward me, and the firelight caught the lines in his face, the quiet storm behind his eyes. "Maddie, we've built something out here. But the world might not understand." I leaned in, pressing my forehead to his. "I don't need them to. I only need you." We kissed, deep and slow and sure, like two people who had been holding their breath for years and had finally exhaled. That night, we lay together in the bunk without pretending. His arms wrapped around me, our legs tangled, breaths sinking like they'd always meant to. He whispered into my hair, "I never thought I'd have this. A second chance. A future that wasn't lonely." I whispered back, "I never thought love would find me here." But it did. Weeks passed. I passed my test, on the first try. We celebrated at a diner in Nevada, with greasy fries and pie that tasted like victory. Jack toasted me with a Coke and said, "To my partner, my girl, the best damn driver I've ever trained." My heart stung with pride. We didn't hide anymore, not from ourselves, not from the road. When we drove, we took turns behind the wheel. When we rested, we shared everything: food, laughter, silence, and kisses. Always kisses, now. Quick ones at rest stops. Longer ones at twilight when the sky blushed over cornfields. People looked sometimes, wondered. But we didn't explain. We didn't owe anyone that. Love doesn't follow a route on the map. It doesn't stick to safe lanes or wait for permission. Sometimes it takes the back roads, the ones full of gravel and fog, the ones no one thinks to travel. But sometimes, that's where you find your home. And Jack, he was mine. Not in the way the world understood, but in the way that mattered most.
Bye.